Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning
House
and Robert
Republicans
Romano.
set to
Okay. Pardon?
House Republicans are set
I'm
to
sitting at
unite
remote
around
location.
Mike Johnson for Speaker of the House. There's a vote. They're doing a quorum call right now on the floor, but it looks like today's the day for Republicans to get a new speaker. I haven't seen any reports of people saying they're holdouts or that they're going to not support Mike Johnson on the floor today. And so this might be a relatively painless process.
Last night, last night there were three people who voted in conference that they wouldn't vote for Johnson. The report this morning is that he's going to get unanimous support. And so what you're seeing is after a long drawn out process, which seems a lot of people kind of fell into despair about, what you're seeing is a culmination of that process and the election of a face and a name that most people have no idea who he is.
That's true. Well, that could be his greatest advantage, is that he hasn't been in a high enough position
Let's
of
talk a little
power.
bit about who Mike Johnson is. Mike Johnson is a congressman from Louisiana. He is a guy who was able to get the votes uh, to become the head of the Republican Study Committee a few years back, which means that's a group of Republicans, center right Republicans, about 180 of them in the House, and he was able to become the leader of that group. He is on the House Judiciary Committee and is a constitutional scholar. He is conservative. People who are social conservatives like him, people who are economic conservatives like him, and from a national defense conservatism standpoint, he's been considered to be a standard conservative. So he's a three-stool conservative, a three legged stool conservative, and and he's a little known face. This is a generational change. Mike Johnson is younger. He is relatively new in the House. He has not been embroiled in speakership battles in the past. He is somebody who comes in with relatively clean hands, and even though he's on the more conservative side of the spectrum, which is a good thing, he has not made enemies of people on the left side of the spectrum. So and lastly and importantly, this may end Kevin McCarthy's aspirations to regain the speakership. So it really is uh, a complete washing of the past with a view towards the future. And when you look at Mike Johnson and you compare him to, um, and you compare him to Joe Biden, and you compare him to Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer, he is the next generation. Um, he's a and a lot of people said you should wait your turn. Well, he did wait his turn. Nobody else could get a majority, and as a result, um, now it's his term, and he is going to be. I think he's going to be a speaker, brings people together.
Yeah, I find it remarkable that almost every single member of the top leadership brass in the House Republican Conference was basically deposed from power in this process, and that Republicans have really gone into, consider Mike Johnson kind of like a relief pitcher right now. He's coming in. We'll see if they can strike out the side now on reestablishing fiscal sanity in Washington, D.C. He's still only going to have a slim 5-seat majority. And so it could be something akin to meet the new boss, same as the old boss, in terms of what can he accomplish versus a Democrat-controlled Senate, Democrat-controlled White House when we get to this new spending package due on November 17th.
Were you out here listening to radio or something?
Unfortunately, what I was doing is did 2 hours of radio interviews, and I didn't take my key out, so the lights stayed on.
Yeah, because it's saying your battery's good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
Okay.
It's good and fast. Everything on it's normal, alternator, everything.
Perfect.
You're at 100% at everything.
So we're going to, I'm just going to mute Rick there for a second. He was just having a side conversation there. But they're still establishing a quorum call here. And they're coming back, to the floor pretty rapidly here in about 4 minutes. The quorum call should be done. They'll establish a quorum. Then they'll do their rigmarole where they're going to have speaker
All right, sir.
nominations.
Thank you very much.
And-
Appreciate it.
And then they're going to
That's
go
okay.
to for statements on the floor, and then we're going to go straight to a vote. Mike Johnson's expected to be elected on the very first ballot. And that should be that. And then there'll be a nice ceremony. They'll hand off the gavel, and Republicans will have a speaker, and they'll be able to move forward, hopefully, as a conference. Hey, Rick, you are not muted, but we can't hear you. Can you hear us? That's okay if you can't. Rick's not muted now, so when he gets his audio back, he can just chime in here. But it's a pretty momentous day, I think, for House Republicans to, after 3 weeks, be able to elect a Speaker of the House that 217 members can agree to, and they didn't have to cut a side deal with Democrats. You didn't have to empower Speaker Pro Tem McHenry to have greater powers or anything like that in order to get a deal done here. I'm sure that's a great relief to not only the American people, but to, frankly, members of the House Republican Conference. You could say that the Mike Johnson speakership is forged in fire. Or you could say it's forged out of desperation, or a little bit of both here. Rick, you might want to jump out and jump back in again in order to get your audio configured here, but you don't have any audio right now. Unless you want to try to say something. That's okay. Rick, you need to fix your audio, buddy. So we're still establishing a quorum call here. There's still a couple minutes left there. And as I mentioned, they will be proceeding to the floor for speeches and nominations, etc. And we could go over some statements right now. Actually, there's a video of Mike Johnson we can watch.
Robert, I
Hey, Rick.
can't hear anything you're saying, and as a result, I am going to bounce, and we'll seek to rejoin you in 20, 30 minutes when I'm
Sure.
when I'm not
come
at
back
my
when they
super
start
secret
voting.
location here at the McDonald's at the National Harbor. So it's a
Okie dokie.
so I'll
We'll
join you in
catch
about
up with
30
you,
minutes,
Rick.
okay?
All right. Take care, Rick. Alrighty. So again, we're waiting for the House to achieve its quorum, and then from there we'll go to the floor to hear what everyone is saying vis-a-vis the speaker election here. But I suppose we can actually we could play some Mike Johnson. This is after he gets the nomination, and we'll hear what he had to say here. Hopefully the audio is good here. Right, set up the mic.
You good?
Mike.
TV?
I'll be when the audio gets fixed. Yeah.
What color you have in you?
All right, a little chitter chatter there. Here he comes.
We want to thank all the press for waiting. It's been quite a process.
What?
Democracy is messy sometimes, but it is our system. This conference that you see, this House Republican majority is united.
All right, so they're united now. Everyone seems very relieved.
I'm honored to have the support of my colleagues, and what they understand about this is servant leadership. We're going to serve the people of this country. We're going to restore their faith
Servant
in this
leadership.
Congress, this institution of government. America is the last best hope of man on the earth. Abraham Lincoln said it. Ronald Reagan used to remind us all the time, and we're here to remind you of that again. We're going to restore your trust in what we do here. You're going to see a new form of government, and we are going to move this quickly. This group here is ready to govern. We're going to govern well. We're going to do what's right by the people. And I believe that people are going to reward that next year. But we have a lot of big priorities, and that is right now. The world is on fire. We stand with our ally, Israel. We have a very busy agenda. We have appropriations bills to get through the process, but you are going to see this group working like a well-oiled machine. We owe that to the American people. The people up here have been sent here by the people of this country to do this job. We are going to do it well. We commit that to you. Thank you for allowing us to go through the process and get to this. It was worth it, and we are going to serve you well.
All right. Go a little bit more here.
The intention is to go to the House floor tomorrow and make this official. And so we will be doing that. And if there are any questions, we'll take a couple. But we're all pretty weary.
They're all weary, he says.
Is that? The intention is to go at noon tomorrow. Yeah, we have some folks absent, and I'll be working with them tonight. So. I don't know.
Were there any?
We're united.
We're united. Hard to hear the question, so we'll just bug out of that. But he says that we're united and we're moving forward here. Here's the quorum call seems to be almost done here, but there's about over 100 members who are actually not voting yet. So people are kind of got out of the wrong side of the bed today, perhaps. But okay, so they're still voting here. We could come out of there. We could read some copy here from the Hill newspaper. This is House GOP hopes fourth speaker nominee brings end to chaos. House Republicans are placing their bets on Louisiana Representative Mike Johnson to be the chamber's next leader with an intention to elect him on the floor Wednesday. They nominated Johnson late Tuesday after a 24-hour period, so over a dozen candidates make their leadership pitches to two candidate forums, and the nomination of Majority Whip Tom Emmer, followed by his quick withdrawal after former President Trump signaled disapproval. Yeah, he called him a globalist. Johnson, 51, has been the House GOP's vice chairman, a junior leadership position since 2021. He is also a former chairman of the Republican Study Committee, the largest conservative caucus in the House. So you actually get a conservative out of this. I'm surprised by that. But after the three candidates, then you had Steve Scalise, you had Jim Jordan, you had Tom Emmer, and now you're up to Mike Johnson, number 4. It looks like 4 is the charm in this case. He stated, quote, Mike Johnson, this is servant leadership. We're going to serve the people of this country. So Ken Buck was one of the holdouts. He will support Mike Johnson. Let's say they're beginning the quorum call. Johnson lays out proposed schedule. He said that, all right, he proposed finding consensus to discharge 2 final appropriations bills, hopefully meeting government funding deadline by November 27. If such a consensus cannot found, Johnson proposed a stopgap measure through January 15 or April 15, rather than through the end of the year, which often results in massive omnibus bills. So it looks like they're looking at a short-term continuing resolution coming out of this process, which is not much different than what we have right now. We have a short-term continuing resolution that goes to November 17. He also proposed that members not break for the annual August recess when members return to their districts for an entire month until all 12 appropriations bills have passed the House. So here is Mike Johnson promising to get all 12 appropriations bills. Let's see, Jeffries doesn't think that that Mike Johnson should be speaker. No surprises there. Let's see. We're still on a quorum call here in the over at C-SPAN, so we can continue reading some of this coverage here. Let's see here. Mike Pence is backing Mike Johnson. Adam Kinzinger says that Johnson will be a, quote, good test for House GOP. Former Representative Adam Kinzinger. Why, if he's a former representative, why is he getting like top billing here? But this might be a nominee who unites the party, though, because here's Donald Trump also urging House GOP to rally behind Johnson. He had stated, I'm not going to make an endorsement in this race because I can never go against any of these fine and very talented men, all of whom have supported me in both mind and spirit. From the very beginning of our great 2016 victory, in 2024 will have an even bigger, more important win. My strong suggestion is to go with the leading candidate, Mike Johnson, and get it done fast, says Trump. Love DJT. Love Donald J. Trump. All right, there you go. Let's go back to the quorum call here. They're taking phone calls over there on C-SPAN, so we're not going to listen into that. But the quorum call should be almost done by now. 369 out of 64. I don't know what it takes. What does it take? 2/3 to have a quorum over there? We can keep on reading some. Massey. Thomas Massey voted present during a roll call on Johnson's speaker nomination. But on Wednesday, he said he would vote for Johnson on the floor. He stated, after speaking with him this morning, I'm committed to vote for Mike Johnson when we go to the floor of the House. Massey wrote on X, formerly Twitter. He has my full support. In case you missed it, Johnson, let's see what else we got here. Kevin McCarthy, he is also backing Mike Johnson. Former Speaker Kevin McCarthy says that Mike Johnson is a friend, a fighter, and a principled conservative who can get the job done. He has my full support as Speaker. We'll keep working together to put our country first and fulfill our commitment to America. The GOP's first two nominees, Scalise and Jordan, backed Johnson last night as well. Who is Mike Johnson? Here's a when this all started, I told my wife that, Jim Jordan's running for speaker. She's like, Jim who? I was like, oh, exactly. Most Americans aren't really privy to this process. And so, they're going to be hearing about Mike Johnson for the first time. So you can see lots of headlines like this. Who is Mike Johnson? Mike who? Mike Johnson was elected to Congress in 2016 in December and represents Louisiana's 4th District. He served in the Louisiana House of Representatives from 2015 to 2017. So he's a relative newcomer to politics, if that's as far back as this is legislative experience goes back to 2015. He's been doing this less than 10 years. He's a member of the House Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. He also serves as chairman of the Subcommittee on the Constitution and Limited Government. Hey, how about that? I didn't even know they had a subcommittee on the Constitution and Limited Government, but he was the head of it. There you go. In 2020, Johnson signed an amicus brief alongside 100 House Republicans supporting a Texas lawsuit aimed at overturning the 2020 election results of Georgia, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. No reports yet that Jack Smith will be waiting outside to arrest Mike Johnson for speaking out against the results of the 2020 elections. We know that's a great crime here in America now that the First Amendment is no longer a thing. And you'll see news stories that'll, kind of highlight, they were challenging the election results. So if you speak out against the election results, so maybe Jack Smith's waiting until get the perp walk after Mike Johnson grabs the gavel for his sedition I'm kidding, of course, in supporting the 2020 overturn the election push that the Trump campaign was doing. Let's see, Matt Gaetz, he says that this whole process was worth it. Matt Gaetz and Tim Burchett said Tuesday night that ousting former Speaker McCarthy from the top post earlier this month was worth it to elevate Mike Johnson. It was worth it, he said. Told reporters. He called Johnson a, quote, transformational leader who is broadly respected in the caucus. So let's check back here. Maybe they're almost done with the quorum call. Not quite. 411 members are present. 22 are not voting. I suppose that's enough for a quorum, but I guess they just want to make sure they're not going to have any stragglers coming in here after the voting begins. But this is, pretty interesting, very momentous. I have to say, I wasn't expecting Mike Johnson, but you know who was? He was just here a few minutes ago. ALG, Americans for Limited Government President Rick Manning. I believe he had stated when McCarthy's speakership was vacated that Mike Johnson would be the most likely next speaker. I was frankly very concerned about the process, given such a small 5-seat majority, that Republicans would be able to put the majority back together again. But here we are now, coming onto the floor. Republicans seem very confident that Mike Johnson will be elected on the very first ballot here. We could go check out some different news sites here in the Washington area, see if there's any other breaking news. Let's see here. Here's one. Here's Politico. Take 4. Can Mike Johnson get 217? Let's zoom in a little bit. All right. 22 days, 14 candidates, 4 nominees, 3 floor votes, and counting. Could House Republicans finally be on the cusp of a breakthrough in their search for a speaker? It sure feels that way. Late Tuesday night, Mike Johnson became the latest nominee. And this time there was no backbiting, no ultimatums, no snarky comments to reporters, just cheers and an overwhelming sense of relief. It's not over yet, though. 3 lawmakers voted present during a roll call poll of the conference, and 22 lawmakers were absent. So it's possible there might be a decisive handful of never Mikes hiding out there. But a lack of vocal opposition and surfeit of genuine enthusiasm that was aired last night on opposing sides of the House GOP marked a significant shift after the 3 weeks of chaos. Mike is a straightforward leader who can unite us, said Carla Jimenez. He was one of the holdouts. Let's see, Johnson is the right guy, said Chip Roy. He was not a holdout. He's got his pulse, I think, on where the American people are. Ken Buck, he was a holdout, said that he thinks he gets it tomorrow. Johnson wasn't anyone's first choice, far from it. On the first ballot Tuesday, he only garnered 34 votes, but it turns out Johnson doesn't have nearly as many enemies as some of his higher profile colleagues. And much to his benefit, Republicans decided after the sudden Donald Trump-assisted termination of Majority Whip Tom Emmer's speaker candidacy yesterday, who, by the way, I think that Tom Emmer, one of his positions was that he opposes the Electoral College. He wants to have some sort of national popular vote. And I think that would be at odds with how Republicans are going to, frankly, be able to win elections. Republicans haven't won the popular vote since 2004. So maybe going to a national popular vote would not favor them. So you have to question whether a Republican leader can really square that position with being a Republican. Democracy is messy sometimes, but this Republican majority is united. Johnson asserted shortly before 11 p.m. last night, surrounded by rowdy and relieved Republicans. He said they'd be ready to govern like a well-oiled machine. We'll see about that. Barring a surprise rebellion, Johnson's ascension saves the House GOP from unorthodox and borderline unworkable alternatives. And we've been through some of those, like empowering Speaker Pro Tem McHenry here. We'll come back to the floor here, see if they finally are in session. They're still taking. Should he secure the votes needed Wednesday at the expected noon vote, 12:35? So they're not really voting. Well, I guess they're voting right now on the quorum. Like, oh, I'm here. It's not really voting, though. Just saying, I'm here. Out will go such ideas as empowering a caretaker Speaker Pro Tem, forging a bipartisan governing coalition with Democrats. Fortunately, those were fantasies. Or in one fanciful brainstorm bandied about yesterday, a power sharing agreement between Kevin McCarthy and Jim Jordan. Those scenarios will evaporate should Johnson win the gavel. What will fill that void are scads of questions about who Johnson is and how he plans to run the House. Meet the nominee. First elected 2016, 51-year-old Shreveport native, came into politics after 2 decades as a constitutional litigator for various right-wing causes. So prior to legislature, he was a constitutional attorney. So this is a guy who knows the Constitution very, very well. Johnson quickly immersed himself in conservative policy circles, winning the chairmanship of the Republican Study Committee in his second term. So Greenhorn becomes Republican Study Committee chairman, and now he's going to be House Speaker. We'll see about that with the votes coming up in just a few minutes here. They're still taking phone calls, though. They're still doing a quorum call. But I think a quorum has been established. 424 members are present. Should be enough to elect a speaker. Let's see here. Winning chairmanship in the second term, which in turn served as a springboard for his current position as conference vice chair. All right. So as former RSC chair and current chair of Judiciary Subcommittee, he has a reputation of a bookish wonk with the sort of policy foundation that hasn't been seen in a potential GOP speaker since Paul Ryan relinquished the gavel. His lack of outward ambition means he has few avowed enemies inside the GOP, while Jordan, Emmer, and Scalise had each amassed a career's worth of internal enemies. There doesn't appear to be anyone who hates Johnson enough to sabotage his rise. But, you know, the motion to vacate the chair with a single member is like a sort of Damocles that'll be hanging over his head. Could make it difficult to, I think, work particularly on these spending bills. So we'll see how that process plays out in the coming months here. And his strong relationships with the hard right, what's that? Could give him a freer hand to govern than McCarthy ever got. Governing roadmap he circulated on Monday floats a new continuing resolution. Ooh, let's see this. It's a governing document. Oh, we're gonna have to zoom in on that. Oh, wow, look at this. All right. Dear friends, we all agree the urgency of this hour demands that the next Speaker of the House must present a specific plan. So on appropriations, our next Speaker must be prepared to negotiate from a position of strength. So can he get to 217 votes on a continuing resolution would be a position of strength, or any appropriations bill for that matter. The only way to secure that is to pass all 12 appropriations measures. I'm confident we can work together to accomplish this objective quickly in a manner that delivers. So here's what he wants. Week of October 23rd, energy and water. That's this week. Then legislative branch, interior and environment, and THUD will be up the 30th. FSGG and CJS, commerce, science, justice, that will be November 6th. Labor, HHS, and agriculture the week of November 13th. This is an ambitious schedule, but if our speaker can work across the conference to unify our membership and build consensus, we can achieve our necessary objectives. That's interesting. Let's see what else he said. Pass McCall resolution condemning Hamas, reach consensus for legislative blueprint, pass all appropes, begin negotiating with White House and Senate, begin conference negotiations with the Senate on the NDAA for fiscal year 24, begin negotiations on the FFA reauthorization as soon as the Senate passes it, return to legislating and effectively messaging on our top issues and priorities, and then that's in October, November. So that's right now and going forward. December, pass a continuing resolution, continue negotiating FY24 appropriations, conference report on the NDAA, pass the Farm Bill, await Senate action, begin negotiations. January through April, continue negotiating appropriations to secure conservative wins for the American people, build conference consensus regarding 2025 budget levels, and pass a budget resolution. So it sounds like I don't see any omnibus bill here. Usually that's what you wind up doing. And then May through July, they're going to do all of the 25 appropriations bills, FY25. They'll complete consideration of the WRDA 2024. You also have the FY25 NDAA should be done by July. They do not want to have an August break period unless all 12 appropes have passed the House. September, wrap up negotiations, and then October through December, expand our majority, complete any outstanding legislative items. It's a very ambitious schedule here. Maybe we're back on the floor yet. Nope, they're still doing calls, but they definitely have a quorum. And so this should be proceeding accordingly. We can check in on the chat here. Let's see here. Here is Richard Pullman, hoping for Johnson over any lib turds. Let's see here. Nancy Bennett Bauman says, please. And then we have Lisa Newcomer, concerning the government. I trust no one. Trust no one. I think that's from a show. Trust no one. But here you go. You got the House Republicans are ready to elect a new speaker. If you're just tuning in, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. And the Republican nominee is Mike Johnson of Louisiana. If he's elected, in fact, the top two Republicans in the House of Representatives will both be from the state of Louisiana, with Steve Scalise being the current House Majority Leader. That's an interesting dynamic there. Probably something that wouldn't have happened in the early republic. I think there's a constitutional rule, for example, that the president and vice president can't be from the same state because they want one state dominating the polity after an election. So you want to have a broad consensus, someone who represents a broad cross section of the American people. And we'll see if Mike Johnson on the speaker side is going to be a real representative for the members there. But I think this is very promising agenda that we're seeing from Mike Johnson here. He has an ambitious, he thinks he can get all the approps done just in the next few weeks that have taken all year long. And then you got a blueprint that gets it all the way into the middle of next year in time for the elections. And he's saying no August recess. So Congress has to get its work done. Now, when he says that we're going to negotiate from a position of strength, that's going to be a tough sell. You have a Democrat-controlled Senate and White House, as he mentions, but typically Republicans cannot get to just a Republican-only majority on appropriations bills. Usually, it's about 25 holdouts who won't vote for these things. Just not going to vote for a CR. They're not going to vote for an omnibus bill. And then the appropriations bills that do come out of committee, will they be conservative enough? Will they have enough cuts in them, enough policy riders to get across the finish line? And so that could be the difficulty that Mike Johnson has, but also that it presents an opportunity to open up the process, have amendments, and let members, kind of put their mark on these bills so that there's a incentive, frankly, to pass them. But if Republicans can't get to 217 on an appropriations bill, a CR, or an omnibus, it doesn't matter what type of spending bill it is, but whatever they're going to pass, if they can't get to, if they can't pass it without Democrat votes, then, you're just going to get the Senate versions of these bills that are going to typically become law. We can go back to the chat here. Check in on the House floor here. We're about 20 seconds behind. Let's see, we skip ahead here. All right, we're all caught up. Let's see here. Here is Lucerne Valley Labradors. Hope they can get their act together. This has been ridiculous. Let's see here. We have Teresa Schweikert, LMAO. He's from Louisiana. What's the chances he's saying all the right things like McCarthy did, but ends up being a rhino? I'd say kind of low. He seems pretty straightforward, kind of a wonky policy guy. So he's going to tell you what he thinks, but he'll also have a pretty well-informed opinion. We'll see how he deals with reporters. We'll also see, again, how he deals with these spending bills. There's only a 5-seat majority, so you can only afford to lose a few members on any particular bill that's coming to the floor. And we saw how messy the speaker election was. You're hopeful. You want to see them kind of get their acts together, but frankly, the next time some of these members vote for a spending bill, it might be their first time. They usually don't vote for spending bills. So, but you're going to need a united front when you want to go talk to the Democrats in the Senate and in the White House and say, "Oh yeah, here's the House bill. All right, let's go to let's go to a conference committee and try to decide what this legislation is going to look like in the final analysis." It's almost 1 o'clock now. It makes you wonder, like, oh, what about those 22 members who weren't at the, didn't vote yesterday? There are a number of absent members when they were asking the question, will you support Mike Johnson on the floor? So we don't know if he does have 217. So he didn't get 217 yesterday, but they had enough of a consensus. There were 3, I think, people saying they were present. So maybe there's going to be some members who vote present. For every 2 members that vote present, that'll take lower the threshold by 1. Right now, the threshold is 217. If 2 members vote present, that would lower the threshold to 216 and so forth. But again, so far, we're not seeing any indication that there are holdouts or people who are demanding concessions or get the conference back together. Let's see here. See if there's any updates here. Nancy Mace accuses McCarthy of disrupting speaker vote. One of 8 Republicans who voted to topple McCarthy accused of disrupting the vote to place him. The paralysis was conducted and manipulated by the former disgraced speaker, Nancy Mace said. He was orchestrating and manipulating the entire situation, including organizing people to vote against Mike Johnson last night. So I'm going to put that on the former speaker. I'm not going to put that on the conference. During multiple rounds of conference voting Tuesday night, McCarthy had a rising number of votes as a write-in candidate, even though he was not in the race. In the final round of secret ballot voting, he garnered 43 votes. The conference, however, almost entirely backed Johnson during an internal roll call vote. So there you have it. Nancy Mace is not happy with Kevin McCarthy and says that he was trying to sabotage Mike Johnson. But here's some more optimistic headlines. Members hug. Take selfies with Johnson on the House floor. People are taking selfies on the House floor. Members are hugging Mike Johnson and taking selfies with him on the House floor, according to Emily Brooks at The Hill. The vibes are very different during Jim Jordan's 3 failed speaker votes or former Speaker McCarthy's 15 rounds of ballots in January. No further headlines there. We could check in on, go back to Politico, see if they got anything here. Until they start voting, it's going to be just kind of like, oh, what are we doing? Or why is this taking so long? I mean, if they get it done today, it'll just be kind of merciful. So they could just get this done here. Johnson rolls toward make or break speaker vote with momentum. So here's the latest from Politico. Mike Johnson is on the cusp of grabbing the speaker's gavel on Wednesday afternoon. He declared minutes before the House opened that he has the 217 votes needed to win on the floor, and he and his allies are openly optimistic about his chances. As Republicans throughout the conference threw their support behind him, the House will hold a quorum call at noon. Well, are they done yet? They ain't done yet. And there's only 4 members not voting. It looks like McHenry's about to come back in here, though, so we'll keep an eye on if he's about to pick up the gavel there. You can kind of see him hovering by the American flag right over there. It's a little tiny flag there. But it looks like they're pretty much ready to gavel in here. If he steps away, then I'll go back to reading the Politico story. But I just don't want to have these people calling in on C-SPAN be on the video. Let's see, picking up the gavel. He picks up the microphone, testing his microphone.
Okay, we'll take you. It looks like the gavel is cut down. We'll go back to the House of Representatives.
Are all members recorded?
Let's get ready to rumble here.
On this roll call, 429 members have recorded their presence. The question now recurs on the election of Speaker. The tellers will please come forward to take their seats once again. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, I didn't even notice.
All right, they're just getting a little bit prepared here. Maybe a good time to go get some coffee. For you coffee drinkers, maybe some spot of tea. If you're an afternoon tea drinker. But the House is coming to the floor here. They're going to elect Mike Johnson as the next speaker. I think that's what's going to happen. And I mean, no one's reporting on any surprises. And so the surprising outcome for a change would be if they didn't elect the speaker, since everyone's expecting that Mike Johnson will be the next elected Speaker of the House. I'm surprised. I didn't think after Matt Gaetz and 8 House Republicans joined with House Democrats in deposing Kevin McCarthy that you would wind up with a potentially more conservative speaker. But here you are now. Mike Johnson's on the floor. Nobody of any significance seems to be opposing him. Other than the House Democrats, they'll be voting for Hakeem Jeffries, but there's not enough of them to make Jeffries the speaker. So assuming Republicans, kind of stick together as a conference, a rare sight, you might want to take a snapshot or hit the record button.
The nominations are now in order. The chair now recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik.
Mr. Speaker Pro Temp, Madam Clerk, colleagues, on behalf of the House Republican Conference, I rise today to nominate the gentleman from Louisiana, Mike Johnson, as Speaker of the People's House.
There's Lisa Stefanik. She's the House Republican Conference Chair. And Mike Johnson is actually the deputy or vice chairman of the House GOP Conference. So Stefanik and Johnson have been working very closely with one another this year. You can see she's very happy to be bringing a nomination for him. And Republicans, they're definitely a different atmosphere on the floor here. They seem very optimistic. So the infighting for now.
We convene this esteemed body today at a time of great crisis across America, a time of unprecedented challenges in this hallowed chamber, and a time when our most precious ally, Israel's very existence, is under attack from forces of evil. Yesterday, our dear colleague, our former conference chair, our chair of Energy and Commerce, Cathy McMorris Rodgers, nominated Mike Johnson in our conference. And she put it best, and I want to quote her today. She said, quote, "Trust has been broken and we have come to a standstill. How do we restore trust between members, leadership, and ultimately between Congress and we, the people?" Cathy went on to say, "There's a sense that it cannot be business as usual." She went on to note, above the Speaker's chair in the House chamber is our nation's motto, "In God we trust." Ms. McMorris Rodgers went on to say, "The times in which we are living demand boldness, unity, and transformational leadership that begins with trust in God and each other. Trust is when the magic happens." In the story of King David, we are reminded that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart, end quote. Today is the day that House Republicans will humbly look in our hearts and elect Mike Johnson as Speaker of the People's House. A man of deep faith, Mike epitomizes what it means to be a servant leader. A deeply respected constitutional lawyer, Mike has dedicated his life to preserving America's great principles of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Mike is a titan on the Judiciary Committee and a dedicated member of the House Armed Services Committee. And as vice chair of our conference, he has united all of our members to speak clearly and boldly on behalf of the American people. A friend to all and an enemy to none, Mike is strong, tough, and fair. And above all, Mike is kind. And at this very moment, this Republican conference knows that we live in perilous times and the American people are hurting. Families are struggling under the pain of inflation caused by reckless far-left spending, unable to afford groceries, heat, or gas. We have an inhumane open border with millions illegally smuggled and trafficked, and tens of thousands of children lost in the chasm of the incompetence and negligence of the Biden administration. Israel is under attack by Iranian-backed Hamas terrorists committing atrocities, with Israelis suffering the bloodiest days in modern memory. Crime is skyrocketing on our streets, while there are vicious calls from the left to defund our great men and women in blue. American energy production has been crushed by Joe Biden's radical, failed, far-left Democrat policies, causing seniors, farmers, and families to pay more at the pump. And Americans fundamentally understand that the federal government has been illegally weaponized against we, the people, shredding the Constitution, targeting conservatives, parents, yes, I'll say it again. The federal government has been illegally weaponized against we, the people, shredding the Constitution 6-9. And let us not grow weary of doing good, for in due season, we will reap if we do not give up. House Republicans and Speaker Mike Johnson will never give up. Today is the day we get this done. May God bless our next Speaker, Mike Johnson. May God bless the United States of America. And I yield back.
Stefanik seems very confident, as we were just noting. Mike Johnson says he has the 217 votes that are needed to proceed with becoming Speaker. That was reporting from Politico. Says he has the votes needed.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
We predicted. I think we're going to unify today. I'm excited about it.
On your face today than we have in the
Now,
past.
Democrats will nominate Hakeem Jeffries one more time. They're saying thanks to Patrick McHenry.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today at the direction of the Democratic Caucus to place into nomination for the position of Speaker of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries from New York.
All right. Yeah, hopefully that was the entire speech. I think they're going to lecture us one more time, though. Maybe they'll surprise us, though. This will actually be the entirety of the speech. They can go on, vote, and get back to business. Hurry up, hurry up, hurry up.
Mr. Speaker.
Oh, man.
Mr. Speaker, you may agree with this, but we are back here 22 days into this Republican manufactured chaos, and House Republicans have brought us to the exact same position that we were back then. All of the infighting, all of the disarray, just to end up where we were 3 weeks ago. These past few weeks, we have been left wondering if Republicans were truly intent on solving our issues, reopening the House of Representatives, and rallying around someone to lead this chamber. Or has this been about something else? Has this been about a focus of House Republicans to find the person who can pass their extreme litmus test to oppose marriage equality, enact a nationwide abortion ban without exceptions, gut Social Security and Medicare, and support overturning a free and fair election? It's a fair question. It's a fair question. No one. Nowhere in that candidate questionnaire is it about growing the middle class, helping our communities, keeping the cost of healthcare lower, and making life for everyday Americans better. The gentlewoman from New York said it right. This has been about one thing. This has been about who can appease Donald Trump. House Republicans have put their names behind someone who has been called the most important architect of the Electoral College objections. He's spearheaded, that's fair, we know how you feel. Yeah, you've made that clear. He's spearheaded the legal effort, joined by more than 100 of our colleagues on the other side of the aisle, in support of a dangerous and baseless lawsuit to overturn the results of the 2020 election. On the eve of January 6th, some of my Republican colleagues even called this a failed strategy. Yet those same individuals plan to stand right next to him today. Mr. Speaker Pro Tem, House Democrats believe that when members of this body voted to reject the results of the 2020 election, they forfeited their ability to lead this chamber.
J6. Is that all they got? I mean, is that all they want to talk about?
On this side of the aisle, we know what leadership looks like. Hakeem Jeffries has never turned his back on the will of the American people. The son of two social workers, he's always stood by the side of working families. The most pressing needs of everyday Americans are his North Star. He believes that everyone in America should have the opportunity to get ahead and achieve their version of the American dream. He believes that access to affordable health care is a right, not a privilege. He believes that reproductive freedom must be guaranteed, not stripped away. He believes that working families, not the wealthy and the well-connected, should be rewarded. He believes in growing the middle class so that everyone can succeed. He believes that our schools and our communities should be safe and free from gun violence. He believes that investing in public schools, not depriving students of fact-based education by banning books. He believes that working families, not the wealthy and the well-connected, should be rewarded. He believes in growing the middle class so that everyone can succeed. He believes that our schools and our communities should be safe and free from gun violence. He believes that investing in public schools, not depriving students of fact-based education by banning books.
Said that one already.
He believes in taking care of our seniors and our veterans, not slashing their benefits. He believes in living up to the promise that America is a beacon of hope and a land of opportunity. He believes in defending democracy against all enemies and adversaries, foreign and domestic. He believes in standing by our allies, Israel and Ukraine. And he believes in keeping our government running and open. Let me be clear. Let me be clear. This is not just a belief system. Leader Jeffries has the track record to back it up. He is certainly a far contrast from who Republicans have nominated, with or without their votes, to nominate today. But if House Republicans choose, they can still join us on a bipartisan path forward. Let's come together to fund our government, support our allies abroad, and deliver for working
The
families.
last little
End the
roll of the
chaos
dice. Hey,
and the
vote for me,
dysfunction,
vote for our
end
guys.
the extremism.
Yeah.
Let's
Don't
open
you
up the
wanna,
people's house.
you know,
I yield
be a
back, Mr.
party
Speaker.
traitor and primaried out of office and just a few months? Hey, vote for Hakeem Jeffries. Yay. Kind of that's that part of their sense there. But we don't know what those 22 Republicans who were absent yesterday are going to do. Anything could happen. Here we
The
go,
reading
guys.
clerk will now
Nervous?
call the roll.
Adams. Jeffries. Adderholt. Johnson. Aguilar. Jeffries. Alford. Johnson. Allen. Johnson. Allred. Jeffries. Amaday. Johnson. Armstrong. Johnson. Arrington. Johnson. Auchincloss. Jeffries. Babin. Johnson. Bacon. Johnson. Baird.
So Bacon, he's dropped his hold on.
Johnson. Balderson. Johnson. Ballant. Jeffries. Banks. Johnson. Barr. Johnson. Berrigan. Jeffries. Dean of Florida. Johnson. Beatty. Jeffries. Bentz. Johnson. Barra. Jeffries. Bergman. Johnson. Beyer. Beyer. Bice. Johnson. Biggs. Johnson. Bilirakis. Johnson. Bishop of Georgia. Jeffries. Bishop of North Carolina. Johnson. Blumenauer. Jeffries. Blunt Rochester. Jeffries. Boebert. Johnson. Bonamici. Jeffries. Bost. Johnson. Bowman. Jeffries. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Boyle of Pennsylvania. Rakeen. Johnson. Brown. Jeffries. Brownlee. Jeffries. Buchanan. Johnson. Buck. Johnson.
So Buck and Buchanan, they're voting for Mike Johnson. So I don't think there's going to be
Johnson.
any objections.
Bazinski.
This could be unanimous
Jeffries.
from Republicans.
Burchett. Johnson. Burgess. Johnson. Burleson. Johnson. Bush. Jeffries. Calvert. Johnson. Kamick. Johnson. Carabeo. Jeffries. Carbajal. Jeffries. Cardenas. Jeffries. Carey. Johnson. Carl. Johnson. Carson. Jeffries. Carter of Georgia. Johnson. Carter of Louisiana. Jeffries. Carter of Texas. Johnson. Cartwright. Jeffries. Kassar. Jeffries. Case. Jeffries. Caston. Jeffries. Castor of Florida. Jeffries. Castro of Texas. Jeffries. Chavez de Reamer. Johnson.
Again, no
Sherfullis McCormick.
surprises so far. No opposition on the Republican
Jeffries.
side to the Speaker designee, Mike Johnson, soon to be House
Jeffries.
Speaker Mike Johnson. Louisiana.
Siscomani. Johnson. Clark of Massachusetts. Jeffries. Clark of New York. Jeffries. Cleaver. Jeffries.
Here, boop. That means Rick
Klein.
Manning is here now. And looks like Mike Johnson's on his way,
Johnson.
Rick.
Cloud.
Yeah, it's, I can tell you, I've heard that last night there were
Johnson.
parties breaking out amongst
Clyburn.
Republican staff and committee
Jeffries.
staff with the sense
Clyde.
that, A, it was over, but also
Johnson.
that they got it right.
Cohen. Jeffries.
Well, anything's better than what they had, which was nothing. And then
Cole.
the idea that it can be improvement on McCarthy,
Johnson.
I suppose, will tend to vindicate
Collins.
Matt Gaetz in the eyes of, if not the American people writ
Johnson.
large, then certainly Republicans who would like to see
Comer.
somebody best represent their
Johnson.
position on issues and serve as a
Connolly.
check on Joe Biden.
Jeffries.
Yeah, and as I was trying to say from the
Correa.
car, which I couldn't tell if anybody could actually hear, this is really also a
Correa.
generational shift.
Costa.
McCarthy, Scalise, Emmert to some
Jeffries.
smaller degree,
Courtney.
had been involved in long
Jeffries.
wrangling over
Craig.
kind of going up the leadership ladder. And this is a break free from that whole process.
Still with the the rule of one, with one vote to vacate, that sits like a sword of Damocles over Mike Johnson's head. We'll see what he can deliver in terms of these appropriations bills, and try to go back to regular order,
Jeffries.
Well, that's-
as
one of-
irregular as that appears to be.
Yeah, one of the
Jeffries.
challenges that any House
Curtis.
Speaker has is you're likely to end up in an omnibus world anyway, because the
Davis of
Senate
Kansas.
has a grand total between scheduled, these are scheduled work days for the Senate between
Davidson.
now
Johnson.
and the end of December. They have a grand
Davis
total
of
of 11
Illinois.
scheduled work days. It's
Jeffries.
unlikely that they're going to be plowing
Davis of
through
North Carolina.
12 appropriations bills
Jeffries.
in that time period.
Dean of
So you've got so the House needs to do their work. He needs to keep them working overtime,
Again.
not going home,
Jeffries.
and get the work done. But
Del Cruz.
the end result, and this, he can't be held accountable if the Senate can't do their job, consolidates that into an omnibus and says, well, we're going to give you 3 or 4 different omnibuses. Here you go. We're putting it all
Jeffries.
together. And that,
Deluzio.
so we may end up with the same
Jeffries.
end result from that
Sontag.
perspective. But by doing
Jeffries.
from the process perspective, by doing the individual
Desjardins.
appropriations bills,
Johnson.
hopefully what we'll end up with is some
Esposito.
policy reforms, some other changes
Johnson.
that are needed
He has the
that
law.
then can be a
Johnson.
sticking point between the House and the Senate,
Bingle.
and where he'll have sound
Jeffries.
footing of his own conference behind him to
Doggett.
fight those fights, to win some battles in this process that opportunities that otherwise would be lost.
Duarte. Johnson. Duncan. Johnson.
I can't overstate the
Florida.
generational shift that's going on here.
Johnson.
It is
Edwards.
for as long as I can remember,
Johnson.
in terms of these
Elsie.
kind of fights, going back to '94,
Johnson.
when Newt Gingrich took the
Emmer.
House. There were leadership battles where different leadership packs. Emmer just voted for Johnson, and so people are giving him this applause since it was his turn, and he didn't get his turn.
Escobar.
So they have but there were battles between, different members would have their leadership pack,
Jeffries.
supporting different candidates in primaries and then general elections to try to
Jeffries.
to get into the leadership kind of
Johnson.
into the queue.
Evans.
And it was, and that tradition
Dell.
continued for the last 30 years.
Johnson.
And this is a speaker who hasn't participated in that. This is a speaker who has not been going around giving money, at least not to a great extent, giving money to one side, one candidate in a primary against another candidate in a primary, with an emphasis on getting people beholden to him to come into the speakership. Now that makes it harder for him to hold people together because they don't owe him anything. And maybe they don't fear him because of that. But it also is why he can get elected, because he doesn't have a bunch of people who got elected in spite of the efforts of Kevin McCarthy in that instance, or Tom Emmer, or Steve Scalise. And because he didn't have a bunch of people who got elected in spite of their efforts, he didn't have a lot of people who said, I'm not rewarding that guy with my vote. So it's healthier that he hasn't done that, but we'll see if he can hold people together without the promise or the threat of political firepower being put out against him.
Jeffries. Fushi.
By the way, it also has a pretty big impact on National Republican Congressional Committee, which has effectively served in many respects as the leadership's enforcement arm. And and so he's going to have an NRCC being run by McCarthy's people, and he's
Frost.
Good chance he wouldn't be one of the people he'd be supporting a primary if there was in the real world. So it's going to be there's going to be some tumult still, but there's a lot of moving parts in this thing. And it's actually one of the reasons why I encourage people to give money to candidates, not to the party, because the party will take your money and give it to whoever the speaker wants to get the money. And that might not be somebody in the party.
Garamendi. Jeffries.
You're breaking up there, Rick.
Barbarino.
Once again, no surprises here.
Johnson.
Republicans are voting for the Republican, Mike Johnson.
Garcia.
Democrats are voting for Hakeem
Johnson.
Jeffries, the Democrat. For Speaker,
Robert
it looks like Mike
Garcia.
Johnson's on his way, guys.
Jeffries. Garcia of Illinois. Jeffries. Garcia of Texas. Jeffries. Jimenez. Johnson. Golden of Maine. Jeffries. Goldman of New York. Jeffries. Gomez. Jeffries. Tony Gonzalez. Johnson. Vicente Gonzalez. Vicente Gonzalez. Good of Virginia. Johnson. Gooden of Texas. Johnson. Gosar.
Hey, Rick. Guess he cut out there.
Johnson.
Yeah, I don't know what.
Gottheimer.
All of a sudden, everything went. I had a bunch of
Jeffries.
circles going. But yeah, I
Thank you.
can see, everybody can see there does not appear to be any
Johnson.
any partisan rift in the
Graves
Republican
of
side, and after after
Roy.
all the struggle,
Johnson.
we're gonna get introduced to a guy who has the respect of the Republican conference,
Green of Texas.
but hasn't been really part of the knife fighting that has been
Jeffries.
endemic in the Republican Party, is
Green
a
of
fight
Georgia.
over control.
Johnson.
So
Griffith.
it truly is a fresh start. It is
Grijalva.
and it is an opportunity to hopefully have a fresh
Yes.
air kind of create opportunity in the whole conference for new ideas to emerge, and a less powerful speaker and more powerful committee systems and the like to begin to take
Johnson.
hold. The answer, Bonnie, to your question is this is being elected Speaker of the House of Representatives. It is a nonpartisan
Harris.
position. And as a result, and that's why the Democrats could have voted for Kevin McCarthy and put him over the top. They chose not to. It's why there was a lot of fear that some of the more liberal Republicans might make a deal with the Democrats to get elected Speaker
Kern.
with the and turn control the part of the House
Johnson.
over to the Democrats. So I understand that is a
Higgins of Louisiana.
so it is a this is
Johnson.
an official position of the House of Representatives. Whereas for positions like the House Minority Leader or the House Majority Leader,
Hill.
those are decisions by the individual parties as to who they want to be the leader of the majority. And that's decided by a simple
Johnson.
majority within the House Republican Conference or
Hines.
the Democratic Caucus.
Jeffries.
I hope that explained it to you.
Henson.
And the fear that this
Johnson.
could have led to a coalition
Horsford.
government with Democrats, I think it seems to me like that was legitimate.
Jeffries.
That going into this, people were very
Houchin.
uncertain about how things would shake out,
Johnson.
particularly after
Houlihan.
Steve Scalise withdrew his nomination,
Jeffries.
and then Jim Jordan was denied 3
Hoyer.
times. That things
Jeffries.
didn't look like they were going too well for
Hoyle of Oregon.
prospective Republican leaders, but that could just be
Jeffries.
because they kept going to the more
Hudson.
well-known Republican leaders that
Johnson.
are right. You went through your
Huffman.
your 3 most well-known Republicans,
Jeffries.
and then suddenly you're
Huizenga.
Mike Johnson. Then you see a lot of
Johnson.
headlines today. Who is Mike Johnson?
Hunt.
So people haven't had enough time
Johnson.
to basically be enemies with him yet.
Issa.
He hasn't been there long enough, and he's only been a legislator since
Johnson.
2015.
Ivy.
Right. Well, and so we talk about this. Well, he came in during the second Republican wave. We had a Republican wave in 2010, and then Obama got elected in 2012, and we had a reelected in 2012, much to many people's surprise. But in 2014, it meant we got another Republican wave that came in, and so Mike Johnson was part of that second Republican wave. And
Actually, no, he came in 2016. He
Jeffries.
got elected 16.
he did he get elected in 16? Well, then he didn't come in that way. He came in even later.
Yeah, no, he was a
James.
Louisiana legislator beginning in 2015. So
Johnson.
he began his political career relatively, kind of late in his life here. So he'd been a
Jayapal.
constitutional attorney prior to that.
Jeffries.
So the good news on that, obviously, is he's a guy. While may have worked in academia, he has worked, or in legal profession, but he's at least worked in the private sector in the recent past. He's not one of these guys whose last time he saw a paycheck was
Johnson.
35 years ago. So this is or had to make a paycheck for that matter, or make a payroll.
Jeffries.
So this is
Johnson,
he's
Louisiana.
relatively still in touch with what it's like to live. And here's Johnson voting for himself. And that's and so he's aware of he's aware of what it is to be in the real world.
Johnson of Ohio.
So
Johnson.
that's a positive thing about it as well.
Johnson of
the,
South Dakota. Johnson.
As we look at this, I
Jordan.
want people to understand that
Johnson.
we've had a lot of complaining, and we have gone. We've chronicled this with you folks and all you listeners and readers and the like I'm trying to be live on every one of these. And
Joyce of Ohio.
while it's frustrating, the process is frustrating. And
Joyce,
it's much
Ohio.
cleaner to just have have somebody say, oh, this is the guy, and you just cram him down your throat.
Joyce of Pennsylvania.
This is a process that really cleansed
Johnson.
a lot of palates.
Ken Logger Dove.
It ended up making it so a lot of enmity that existed got played out and
Catter.
got talked about. And now it's out of there. Now it's gone. And they're coming back together in unity and unanimity,
Jersey.
coming back with a guy who's
Johnson.
been in the House since got elected in
Keating.
2016, been in the House since 2017.
Jeffries.
Essentially, he came in the same time Donald
Kelly
Trump
of
did.
Illinois.
And that's and so that's his extent of his
Kelly of
his
Mississippi.
knowledge. He came in with Trump,
Johnson.
and he's somebody who Trump will
Kelly
be able to
of
work with should
Pennsylvania.
Trump get reelected president in 2024.
Khanna. Jeffries. Kiggins of Virginia. Johnson. Kildee. Jeffries. Kiley. Johnson. Kilmer. Jeffries. Kim of California. Johnson. Kim of New Jersey. Jeffries. Krishnamurthy. Jeffries. Custer. Jeffries.
By the way, one of the other
Custer.
interesting aspects of this is
Johnson.
a lot of members,
The Hood.
really for the first time,
Johnson.
have spent time talking to their
Beloga.
fellow members within the
Johnson.
Republican conference. We don't realize how isolated these guys can be. You know, they
Amalfa.
get up, they have
Johnson.
typically there's a fundraising breakfast that they're going to. Then they go and they
Johnson.
go to their committee hearings and they go and they do their work.
Landsman.
They have to deal with their staff. You know, they come on the floor, but they come on the floor in ones and twos and don't come in the floor en masse. They have
Jeffries.
seat mates who they sit next to. They have the people who are there in committee
Langworthy.
with, and they go
Johnson.
once a week. They go to a
Larson
conference
of
meeting where
Washington.
everybody from the conference is supposed to
Jeffries.
be there. But by and large,
Larson.
there's not, and that's all about what's happening that week. And here's what we're going to bring up, and any
Landsman.
objections. What are we dealing with? And kind of trying to air that out in private,
Landsman.
and then bring it to the floor and pass bills. That's kind of how it
Jeffries.
works. But these guys don't spend a lot of time talking about the big
Langworthy.
picture, the 40,000 foot. How do we run this
Larson.
place? What do we like? What do we don't like?
Larson.
Those
of
are, and they tend
Washington.
to cluster in
Jeffries.
groups, the Freedom Caucus or other little
Larson
groups
of Connecticut.
that sort of
Jeffries.
draw up with the complaints and the like. But this
Johnson.
process has allowed all those people, whether they're on the left or right,
Paterno.
to talk to each other. You know, Jim Jordan was calling every
Johnson.
single person at the conference. Last night, there were 11
Waller.
people who were not at the Republican conference
Johnson.
meeting, and Johnson called all 11 of them.
Lee of
And, you know,
California.
and we don't know who goes to the gym together and all that kind of stuff. What we do
Lee
know
of
is
Florida.
that
Johnson.
a guy like
Lee of Nevada.
Johnson is
Jeffries.
calling up his colleagues,
Lee of
and
Pennsylvania.
they are in mass kind of talking about what do we
Jeffries.
do? We can't come up with an answer.
Ledger Fernandez.
And they're scrambling to try to figure out how to
Jeffries.
solve the problem. You have
Lesko.
people, really smart people, who are getting together, and you get the grievances out. They learn a little bit more about one
Levin.
another. They learn about what each other's
Johnson.
real concerns are, what their needs are,
Levin.
what they'd like to see get done.
Jeffries.
And through that fresh air,
Lou.
you have a much greater chance to succeed rather than be
Jeffries.
stuck in the same modules that you were in before. And I'm hopeful that this process
Jeffries.
broke down some of the walls within the
Somerville.
Republican conference. Most people don't
Johnson.
realize, but the Main Street Coalition, which is the
Lucas.
liberal wing of
Johnson.
the House Republican
Luke
Party,
Meyer.
and the Freedom Caucus
Johnson.
didn't talk to each other. They rarely, ever talked to
Luna.
each other. And the reason they were
Johnson.
at loggerheads on all issues
Terrell.
inside the conference.
Johnson.
And you build up walls and you sit there and you say, oh, we're fighting
Lynch.
with one another. And through this
Jeffries.
process, they came together on a spending bill
Mace.
that didn't pass, but they came together on a spending bill
Johnson.
at the beginning of this process.
Magaziner.
They've had to talk to each other and find out, well,
Jeffries.
what do we do? What do we need to do
Maliotakis.
to get you guys on board with the speaker and vice
Johnson.
versa? And this communication
Man.
throughout the conference about what the needs are, what the vision is for this
Johnson.
Republican conference should do
Manning.
a tremendous amount of good
Jeffries.
for the future and
Massey.
moving forward for the next year. It is my hope
Johnson.
that they take the time after this vote,
Johnson.
and and once they get to another
Matsui.
recess, that they take the time to schedule a quick
Jeffries.
retreat where they
McBath.
can get together and say, how are we going to do the 3 Bs? And 3 Bs I've outlined: Biden, budget, border.
McCarthy.
Biden, budget, border.
Johnson.
Find the things that can come together. There's Kevin McCarthy voting for Johnson, Mike Johnson, and getting applause. Hard day for Kevin McCarthy because there was hope. He had hope that he would be able to put together a deal to
Johnson.
restore himself to the speakership.
McClain.
And today that hope has been put to an end.
Johnson.
And it's a
McClellan.
it's a tough day for him personally. And that one of his lifelong dreams has now, I think, been put to bed. And
Johnson.
some people might be cheering that, others might be, sad
McCullough.
about it. But just as a man,
Jeffries.
I can empathize with him in terms of that feeling of loss he might have. And yes,
Johnson.
Mike, we're going to get a speaker today. That
McGarvey.
and
Jeffries.
when I was last
McGovern.
night when I heard he was nominated,
Jeffries.
uh,
McHenry.
and I got reports
Johnson.
from inside the room, and it was pretty clear that a lot of the younger members were sick and tired of all the fighting and just wanted a fresh breath, a breath of fresh air. That's what they're getting. And this what appears to be a unanimous Republican vote for Johnson I think it's an important step
Jeffries.
forward for this country.
Menendez.
And for now getting down to the work, the hard
Jeffries.
work of governing.
Maine.
So
Jeffries.
Rick's so optimistic. I think this is
Muser.
born out of desperation.
Johnson.
They're
Fume.
they're literally taking the bacon out of the
Jeffries.
coals, and they're like, oh, it's still edible.
Miller of
We still
Illinois.
have a majority. It's not completely charred yet.
Johnson.
We only wait.
Miller
till
of
we-
Ohio.
So get on with it. Now it's time to get back to
Johnson.
work. Get those. They say they're going to get the appropriations bill
Miller
done.
of West Virginia.
Fine. Get them things on the floor.
Johnson.
But have no illusions. Getting
Miller
to
Meeks.
217 for speakers pretty darn hard. Getting to
Johnson.
217 on a
Mills.
spending bill with Republicans, just Republicans, I think is
Johnson.
It's practically rocket time. I don't
Molinaro.
know that he has the votes to do that. So
Jeffries.
we'll see what comes
Well,
out of this appropriations
Moskowitz.
process. But don't be surprised if you see more
Johnson.
continuing resolutions
Bolton.
as consensus is not built.
Jeffries.
Well,
Murphy
I'm not going to
Moore
be
of
surprised at
North Carolina.
anything. What I do know is we're going to have a fighting chance to
More
make some cuts in the budget. And all you can
Johnson.
ask in politics is a fighting
More
chance to get yourself
Wisconsin.
to win. And that's what we're going to have. We're going to have a
Jeffries.
speaker who is
Moskowitz.
on our side on this. And the fact he's a constitutional attorney, unlike Barack Obama, who claimed to be one, this guy's actually probably read he's read the Constitution, and being a Republican constitutional expert means he's for limited government, he's for separation of powers. As a member of the Judiciary Committee, he's been dealing with the weaponization of the government. He's well aware of what the Biden overreaches have been. And so we're looking at a guy who actually understands the assault that this
Neal.
nation is under, and is in a petition to lead this House of Representatives to stand up, A, for the prerogatives of the House, but B,
Johnson.
for the
House.
freedoms that our Constitution guarantees each and every one of us.
Johnson.
So I am optimistic, and I think this is a day we should be optimistic. I think this is a
Norcross.
day when we should look forward. It doesn't mean this is just the start.
Newman.
There's a ton of work to be done, but we're ready to do that work. Here in Americans for Limited Government, we're taking a look at regulations that have overreached, and we're trying to identify those overreached regulations
Oberholtz.
that we can challenge and we can try to take down based
Ocasio-Cortez.
upon Supreme Court rulings, which make them illegal
Vogels.
constitutionally. We have somebody who's the speaker, and Mike Johnson, who's going to understand what the heck we're talking about, and will likely be somebody who is supportive of doing those kind of things and enforcing the Constitution and standing up for what the House of Representatives is supposed to stand up for. And that's what the people sent them to do. But it's really all about the spending.
Panetta.
It's about the spending. And and the power of the purse. And that's what this
Jeffries.
guy knows. That's what he's going to do.
That's correct.
And I just find it heartening that we're able to find somebody with this kind of
Jeffries.
talent.
Payne,
Oh no,
Jeffries,
I think Rick Manning lost his signal again.
Pelosi,
Give it a few seconds. I bet you he sees a big spinning wheel right now. Just Nancy Pelosi voting. Karen Smith says, "Yay, looking good, Mike." It does look good for Mike Johnson. Looks like he's on his way to becoming the next speaker.
Jeffries, Peltola,
Michael Lozewski agrees.
Jeffries.
Looks like we might get a speaker
Pence.
today. I agree, Michael.
Johnson,
Let's see here.
Perez, Jeffries, Perry, Johnson,
Here's Tommy
Peters,
Lynn. So when
Jeffries.
they're done voting here,
Pedersen,
are they going to do any real work or are
Jeffries.
they done for today? They shouldn't be allowed to leave
Kluger.
till everything is caught up
Johnson,
from over 100 years ago as fast as
Phillips.
they move. That's what it feels like, how much
Jeffries.
they really work.
Pingree,
I don't know how quickly they'll get back to work.
Jeffries,
But
Hokan.
we were reading, if you
Jeffries.
go back into the broadcast, I was reading
Porter.
from Mike Johnson's schedule,
Jeffries,
very ambitious schedule for
Posey,
House over the next coming weeks. They're going to get a lot of
Johnson.
appropriations bills to the floor
Presley.
here. They're going to
Jeffries.
they want to get all the appropriations bills done, and I see
Quigley.
nothing in the schedule that Mike
Jeffries.
Johnson has put forward for an omnibus bill.
Ramirez,
So it's probably just going to be stopgap
Jeffries.
continuing resolutions plus these
Raskin.
appropriations bills coming to the floor one by
Jeffries.
one towards the end of the year.
Reschenthaler,
They have till November 17th.
Johnson,
We'll see how they deal with the Senate
Rogers
and
of
how the Senate
Washington.
wants to respond to the House Republican proposals. Democrats obviously
Johnson.
will be pushing for an omnibus bill because they think they
Rogers of
control
Alabama,
that promise of that process.
Johnson,
But Republicans are going to, under Mike Johnson, they don't seem to
Rogers
be
of
interested
Kentucky.
in an omnibus bill
Johnson,
because that's why McCarthy lost his job in the first
Rose,
place. So you don't want to make the same mistakes that McCarthy made. If there
Johnson.
are 5 members saying if you do
Rosendale,
CRs or if you do omnibus bills, you're
Johnson.
history. Then Mike Johnson
Ross.
has to listen to that, and he has to
Yes.
go to the
Jeffries.
alternative, which is to try to get all these
Rouser.
appropriations bills to the floor of the
Ross.
House and get them ratified. Again,
Jeffries,
there are no surprises here.
Rouser.
Republicans are voting for the Republican candidate,
Johnson,
Mike Johnson. Democrats are voting
Roy.
for the Democrat candidate, Hakeem Jeffries.
Johnson,
No surprises, no
Ruiz.
other votes, no hissy fits, nothing like
Jeffries,
that.
No surprise. And I talked about schedule. We're on the Senate side.
Jeffries,
Between now and when this CR
Rutherford.
runs out, they have 5 work days scheduled. Okay, grand total of 5
Johnson.
work days. Now they could expand that because
Ryan.
they're obviously not working very much, but
Jeffries.
but that's what's on the schedule right now.
Salazar.
So it is a.
Johnson,
So I think what we're going to find, and this is exactly what
Salinas.
the Republicans were trying to avoid,
Jeffries,
but to some extent,
Sanchez,
because they've been
Jeffries,
trying to figure out who's going to be the speaker
Santos.
for the last 3 weeks.
Johnson,
They lost time
Sarbanes.
in terms of this process, and as a result, they're going to end up with another CR
Jeffries,
that pushes back to December, and it's going to be, and they're going to have to
Scalise.
work really hard to get appropriate bills done between then and now. And that is and truthfully, they won't be able to get them all done. There's some appropriate bills where. I'll give you there's some examples, but back in the day when Health and Human Services and Labor Department, and I don't remember
Jeffries.
who else was in that one, but
Stokowski,
Health and Human Services and Labor won a big
Jeffries.
one of the appropriations bills, and it never got done. Why? Because no Republicans would vote for an appropriations bill that funded
Schneider.
Obamacare, and no Democrats
Jeffries,
would vote for one that wouldn't fund Obamacare.
Fulton,
And as a result, you ended
Jeffries.
up with that entire
Fryer.
bill being kind of
Jeffries,
jammed into a bigger
Schweikert.
package, and the vote for
Johnson.
Obamacare got hidden by
Austin
the
Scott.
vote for other things that
Johnson.
weren't specifically about Obamacare.
David
Those
Scott,
are so those are the kind of
Jeffries.
things where you just there's
Scott
gonna be things
Rutherford,
like that happen. So they're going to get at the
Jeffries.
end of the day, they're probably going to
Self,
from practical scheduling perspective.
Johnson,
They're likely to end up
Sessions.
with a continuing resolution
Johnson,
extended,
Sewell.
they're going to have to be spending.
Jeffries.
This guy, Mike Johnson's not getting sleep for the
Sherman.
next between now and Christmas because he's
Yeah.
I
got
hope
to
they
put
put
together.
HR2 on it.
Cheryl.
You know, I
Well,
hope they
that-
can get the HR2 CR back. I hope it's not just a, you know, do nothing
Jeffries.
CR. And then
Well,
we'll just
they
run
might
out
be
the
able to do
clock
that.
and do the automatic. I mean, if they do nothing on the CRs, I mean,
Johnson.
there's an automatic spending cut that
Slatkin.
goes into effect next year
Jeffries.
from the debt deal.
Smith of
debt
Missouri.
deal. So maybe that's good enough. Maybe that's all they
Johnson.
can accomplish.
Well,
I
one
hope
of
they
Smith
the,
of
I hope they
Nebraska.
try harder. I hope they try to get
Johnson.
something on the floor that actually forces
Smith of New
questions
Jersey.
about border security and other
Johnson.
priorities the American people
Smith of
have.
Washington.
on
I
every
would
one of
predict
these
that I would-
spending
I would-
bills.
Jeffries.
They shouldn't
Yeah.
be passing up any opportunity
Smucker.
to attach Republican
Johnson.
and conservative types of ideas,
Sorensen.
limited government ideas to every single
Jeffries.
bill that's guaranteed to become
Soto.
law. Oh, they're not doing their jobs. That's just my
Jeffries.
view
no,
on it. I don't
You're
want
right.
to see some of
I
these
agree with you.
uniparty CRs that do
Jeffries.
nothing. They should have a Republican
Sparks.
CR if they're going to do a CR, and it should have HR2 on it.
Johnson.
And I hope the members who voted no on the last
Stensbury.
vote can find it in themselves to try
Jeffries.
to help leadership instead of sabotaging them, frankly.
well, that
Stanton.
that CR was that
Jeffries.
didn't pass. That Chip Roy and Scott
Sauber.
Perry were instrumental
Johnson.
in doing. That they did it
Steele.
across the aisle with the Main Street across the
Johnson.
Republican spectrum with the Main Street
Stefanik.
Conference agreeing with it. And
Johnson.
what it did is it had
Kyle.
it cut the spending for the time of the CR to the levels that were
Johnson.
agreed to on the debt ceiling.
Stevens.
And so, which is a cut.
Jeffries.
And so we would be spending less money today
Strickland.
if that had passed and become law than we are right now. That's just a
Jeffries.
fact. It also had HR2
Paul.
trying to, as much as you can, using the power of the purse to rein in
Swalwell.
the out of control border policy of
Jeffries.
Biden. So we're not seeing
Tice.
3 million people coming across the border
Jeffries.
in 2024 like we have in
Capano.
2023. That's just a number. That's just a
Jeffries.
fact. And
Right,
that
but are
didn't-
there
and-
217 votes for
Well,
that type of
and
legislation?
that's a
If
well, that's a
not,
question.
then Mike
Well,
Johnson's going to have a really hard go at this.
Well, if not, and remember, trying to pass that legislation and then saying I can't get Republican
California.
conference to agree, and then going and doing a clean, so-called clean CR that didn't do anything about any of those problems,
Jeffries.
is what got Kevin McCarthy
Thompson
thrown
of
out.
Pennsylvania.
So the guys like Matt Gaetz now have to
Evans.
say, wait a second,
Johnson.
the initial reason for getting rid of Kevin McCarthy, perhaps we were part of that. And the deal we have with Kevin McCarthy no longer exists because he's no longer speaker.
Indeed.
So consequently,
Jeff-
we may have to hopefully can polish up that bill that didn't pass, maybe put
Bronco.
some additional cuts into it, maybe make some other
Jeffries.
policy riders into it
Torres of California.
that are meaningful and send it to the Senate. And the difference,
Torres of New
the real
York.
difference is going to be, Robert,
Jeffries.
everybody knew that bill, the Senate was
hand.
going to reject it and
Jeffries.
McCarthy was going to fight for it. And that's the real reason why they didn't vote
Turner.
for it, because it was window dressing.
Johnson.
Mike Johnson, on the other hand, if he says, no, we're going to fight for this,
Jeffries.
at that point,
Johnson.
the Senate has to decide.
Underwood.
And Joe
Well, you're
Biden
going to
needs
shut
to
down the
decide.
government then.
Are you
You're
gonna
going to have
shut-
a government
yeah,
shutdown?
Well,
Are
Guaranteed.
they-
You
well,
actually
the
fight.
question is,
Johnson.
then Joe Biden's going to have to
Van
decide.
Drew.
Do I want to have a fight
Johnson.
in a world
Van
where
Dyne.
we're going to have
Johnson.
or we actually had $2 trillion deficit last year. We're going to have a $2 trillion deficit again this year.
Van
We had
Orden.
500. We're going to run $500 billion
Van Orden.
deficit just this month. It's
Vargas.
we've got massive spending going on right now.
Jeffries.
Are we going to pay for stuff? Does
Vasquez.
Joe Biden in an election year, when one of his
Jeff-
arguments is I cut the budget,
VC.
does he want to spend? Does he want to have a fight
Jeffries.
about not cutting the budget?
Velasquez.
Now his base will,
Jeffries.
but will Joe Biden think
Wagner.
can he win an election
Johnson.
by having that extended fight?
Wahlberg.
Can he win an election looking at
Johnson.
the border and the complete
Waltz.
chaos of the border and say, hey, I want to spend
Johnson.
$15 billion on the border, but what I want to
Wasserman
have is
Schultz.
about $9 billion on the border
Jeffries.
in my Israel Ukraine
Waters.
package. But the $9 billion was to basically hire Border
Jeffries.
Patrol officers who did nothing but
Watson
fill
Coleman.
out paperwork and get people on planes and send them around the country. And so there isn't a backlog at the border, as opposed to, so no backlog on the border is what is what Biden's trying to do. Well, his backlogs means send them into your town, and as opposed to closing the border. So that's the fight. That's going to be a fight. We're going to have it, and hopefully, and I talked about the three Bs. That's that's two of the three Bs. It's budget and border. And I think with budget and border, and it's also Biden reining in Biden's policies. So we've got a shot here to have. If we can't win the fight, that's one thing.
And the tellers
But
deserve
darn it,
to have the attention.
I
of the
want to
House.
have the
Before we
fight.
continue.
That's what we have to have,
Weber
the
of
fight,
Texas.
and Mike Johnson will have that fight.
Johnson.
What did you say?
Webster of Florida.
It doesn't
Johnson.
matter. They're making speeches with their
Winstrup.
votes on
Oh, good.
on the Democrat side. So now
Johnson.
Republicans like, we need to make speeches when we vote
Westerman.
too. And then McHenry's like, come on,
Johnson.
knock it off, guys. What's going on?
Wexton.
Wexton. I'm not running again. I don't care.
Jeffries. Wild. Jeffries. Williams of Georgia. Jeffries. Williams of New York. Johnson. Williams of Texas. Johnson.
Here we go.
Wilson of Florida. Wilson of Florida. Jeffries. Wilson of South Carolina.
Joe Wilson.
Johnson.
You
Yay!
lie. Joe Wilson just got it in. Joe Wilson
Johnson.
of
Yep.
You Lie
Womack.
fame.
You have a speaker now.
We have a speaker.
Speaker Mike Johnson, breaking news. The House of Representatives has just elected Mike Johnson of Louisiana to be the next Speaker of the House. He is pretty much over. Republicans are really happy. They're cheering. They finally, after 3 weeks kind of impasse, they finally found a speaker who nobody hates. To lead the House
nobody
until they
hates.
get to the next spending bill, and then it's all up in the air again. But you've got to stop that speaker until you get to November 17th. We'll see if we get past that.
Johnson. Yakum. Johnson. Zinke.
The next Speaker of the People's House.
Yeah, Otis, hooray is right. It's a, I'm going to
Johnson.
just say this again. Maybe I'm just an optimist, but you know what? Having a fight about the future of the country is a good thing. And we had that. It may have been messy. A lot of people may have gotten upset, but darn it, we had a fight about the future of the
Boyle,
country
Pennsylvania.
and came through it with 221
Boyle,
people
Pennsylvania.
voting for a speaker out of the Republican conference. And, God bless America that we can have a fight,
yeah.
we can be mad at each other, we can still come together to try to move this country
yeah.
forward on constitutional limited government principles. So I'm happy.
Gallego.
No, definitely. This is an improvement
Jeffries.
from where we were just I think just a few days ago. But finally they're going to get back to work at the House of
Vicente
Representatives. And I don't expect much to change in leadership.
Vicente
Do you think-
Gonzalez.
it seems like everyone's except for Kevin McCarthy gets to keep their job.
Now that'll be for the House conferences side, but I think that's probably true. The change will be Mike Johnson's going to bring in new staff, at least some new staff in the Speaker's office. Staffing is very, very important.
And Orden.
And it'll be, and so that'll
Orden.
provide some fresh views and some fresh philosophical views from the top.
There are many.
And
members-
Scalise
role
and
they may
the other leadership
well.
officers are going to have to adapt to the leadership of the speaker. And and that staff, and I was on House leadership staff at the Republican conference myself, and I can tell you that staff has enormous influence. And by changing out the staff, the McCarthy staff, you're going, at least some of it, you're going to find yourself in a position where some things that might have just, the staff just kind of didn't put as a priority, well, now maybe a priority. And that's the kind of leadership you need in terms of telling your committees what you want them to do and what you want them to emphasize, making decisions. For instance, one of the first things you should do is you should reiterate that there is an impeachment inquiry, just to make certain for the record that there is. And he should give his committees marching orders on what they need to do. The appropriations committees have their bills ready to go. So he needs to have those bills being distributed and getting people, and anybody, have rules committee set up when are we going to have when do amendments need to be in for rules committee and the like, and get those appropriations bills on the floor. He needs to tell these guys, you're going to be working on Mondays and Fridays. So,
well, that takes a strong speaker, Rick. So,
well,
hopefully the speaker, hopefully the office hasn't been so weakened by this process, and I don't think it has.
I don't think it has.
I think John, he's gonna have the same rules that McCarthy did, and you can utilize that amendment process and build consensus, or he could try to run things the way things were run before and try to jam things through after consensus can't be had. So hopefully he builds consensus.
Well, Robert, I think you're wrong in terms of the legislative part of it. For instance, the underlying bills that are coming out of these committees are likely to, some of the things that like you and I might have seen in them suddenly, and then you say, wait a second, you got to fix this. And it's and I think there will be more votes to fix stuff in rules,
of which the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana has received 220 votes. And the Honorable Hakeem Jeffries of the state of New York has received 209 votes. Therefore, the Honorable Mike Johnson of the state of Louisiana, having received a majority of the votes cast, is duly elected Speaker of the House of Representatives for the 118th Congress.
I recognize, Robert, his first thing he's going to have to deal with is the Israel-Ukraine emergency package.
Right. They got the war to fund.
And hopefully they will split that into at least 3 parts, so you can deal with the actual emergency war funding for Israel in one part, the actual the aid part of it that goes and deals with Hamas and the like.
To escort the Speaker-elect to the chair. The gentleman from Louisiana, Mr. Scalise. The gentleman from Minnesota, Mr. Emmer. The gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Stefanik. The gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. Hudson. The gentleman from Alabama, Mr. Palmer. The gentlewoman from Michigan, Mrs. McLean. The gentleman from California, Mr. McCarthy. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Donalds. The gentleman from Oklahoma, Mr. Hearn. The gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Bergman. The gentlewoman from Washington, Mrs. Rogers. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Arrington. The gentleman from Texas, Mr. Fallon. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Molinaro. The gentlewoman from Florida, Mrs. Carmack. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Jeffries. The gentlewoman from Massachusetts, Ms. Clark. The gentleman from California, Mr. Aguilar. The gentleman from California, Mr. Liu. The gentlewoman from Washington, Ms. Del Bene. The gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Clyburn. The gentleman from Colorado, Mr. Neguse. The gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Escobar. The gentlewoman from Illinois, Ms. Underwood. the gentlewoman from Florida, Miss Wasserman Schultz, the gentleman from Michigan, Mr. Kildee, the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Jacobs, the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Crockett, and the members of the Louisiana delegation, Mr. Graves, Mr. Higgins, Ms. Letlow, Mr. Carter. The committee will retire from the chamber to escort the speaker-elect to the chair.
So now we're going to get a speech, I think, some ceremony with the gavel. Get Johnson up there. Get him. They don't have to swear him in, do they? Or just hand them a gavel and they cheer.
Well, we're going to watch. This is the pomp and circumstance that, governments have. And, but yeah, there'll be a procession. I don't know how people are chosen for that procession, but there'll be a procession of people who come, who escort the speaker to the chair. It's bipartisan. Obviously, it leans Republican. There's more Republicans in the procession than Democrats, but there are Democrats in the procession. And this is because, remember, as we explained earlier, the speaker is an officer of the House of Representatives. And as a result, they have responsibilities, the entire House. The speaker is responsible for the Sergeant at Arms. And in many cases, they change the Sergeant at Arms, so I wouldn't anticipate that occurring. There's a number of different positions that the speaker can appoint that are that work at their behest. Things like maintenance of the Capitol. The speaker is responsible for that in conjunction with the Senate side. So this is not just about the politics. This is about the operation of the House of Representatives, the security of the House of Representatives. It's why Speaker Johnson, one of the promises he's made is he's going to release all of the videotape from January 6th. Because the Speaker's office, as the person responsible for the Capitol Police, has that access to that, and they have and the Speaker has the power to release that. That is video that is owned by the Speaker, by the body. And so you've got this. This isn't just the politics. This is about turning over who's responsible for actually managing the problems of the House. And the problems of the House could be, the American flag has a fray in it and it needs to be changed. And as minute as that to, how many officers, why do we have only half the officers here as they did on January 6th? And why were those officers not equipped with the appropriate gear? So those are all things that fall within the Speaker's realm. And Mike Johnson, so this job is much bigger than just trying to manage the legislative branch. It's also managing the physical building and the security of the building. So it's a big job. And truthfully, it amazes me that people fight over it because it is a massive job. But the good news, Robert, is if you get the job, the Speaker's office has this great balcony. Okay. When you look at the Capitol coming from the mall, there's a balcony about 3 stories up, and that's the Speaker's office. And the Speaker's office has this beautiful balcony that oversees the Capitol Mall. You have the Grant's, the monument to Ulysses S. Grant that's right at the base of the Capitol. And then you look beyond and you've got the Capitol Mall. You've got the Smithsonian's running down each side of the Capitol Mall, all the way down to Washington Monument. And beyond, you can see the Lincoln Memorial. It is a spectacular view. And it reminds the speaker of that of what he's kind of the enormity of the responsibility that the speaker has. And so it's but that is kind of one of if there's a perk, the perk is you get the best view in Washington, D.C. those are little things, but people don't realize. But from a fundraising perspective and from the politics perspective, being able you want to level the playing field with a billionaire who thinks they got a lot going on. Take him out on the speaker's balcony and say, "Do you have this view?" Not a billionaire in the world does, and they know they'll never have it. And it just says, this is, the seat of the power for the greatest nation in the history of the world, and this is an office that is leading one of the branches of government, or at least half of one of the branches of government. So it's a lot of those things are used for a lot of reasons, but if nothing else, it would be humbling to look at that view and know, this is a big responsibility, and hopefully it drives people to their knees, recognizing that we can't do that without our Lord. So Vicente Reyes, Mike Johnson, Speaker of the People's House. Yes, he is, and I am ecstatic by the outcome. And I was talking before my computer blew it about, we strongly supported Jim Jordan, and many of you jumped into that. Thousands of supporters of Americans for Limited Government contacted Congress on that. It was very, very important. Mike Johnson has announced that one of the things he wants to emphasize is reaching out to third-party groups and to make certain that people are heard. And that was first of all, he did a pretty good job of that when he was at RSC, but from a practical perspective, I think that's a direct relationship to that outreach, to that campaign, where people outside didn't feel like they were being heard, felt disenchanted. Jim Jordan didn't win, and that was the guy. Good news about Mike Johnson is, and not Jim Jordan, is Jim Jordan still gets to be the chairman of the Judiciary Committee, and we need a Jim Jordan, a fighter, to be that chairman of that Judiciary Committee, to go after the weaponized government with vigor and with full support of the Speaker's office, which he enjoyed with McCarthy, but some of us feared he would not enjoy if somebody else became Speaker.
And you're watching live coverage of the new Speaker and his.
You still there, Rick?
I am.
Oh, okay. You can keep talking. I was just turning off the C-SPAN guy.
No, that's okay. So, so you're going to see the swearing in, as they said, and that takes a few minutes. But so I personally am, I just want to thank everybody out there who took the time and effort to contact their congressman about whether congressman voted the way you wanted to or not. Contact your congressman, supported Jim Jordan, made the congressman understand that this is an important vote that you're watching. I think it's because of that vote that Tom Emmer didn't win. That effort, basically enough congressmen said, we can't just do business as usual here. People are watching. And I think that had a role in it. And so, yes, it might have felt like, gee, they don't care what I think. But I think the election of Mike Johnson, who I believe that you will find that you really like, I think the election of Mike Johnson as Speaker is kind of a validation of the power of the voices you had. And the fact he's going to emphasize reaching out to conservative groups and coalitions like that as part of his speakership. By the way, that's not new, but he did make it as a point of emphasis. I think that's a good thing. In fact, my job when I was working for J.C. Watts House Republican Conference was doing outreach. What is going on, Robert?
It timed out.
Okay. Well, so that was my job, to do coalitions and outreach for the House Republican Conference. So I'm familiar with that role, and and I suspect it hasn't changed much from then to now. But so this is going to be, it's a new beginning, and I just believe when you get a new beginning, you need to give people space to do their job. And we're going to call balls and strikes honestly on this, obviously. But I do believe we need to give space for Mike Johnson to kind of, learn how to ride the bicycle before we criticize him for not riding it perfectly. Because this is a learning,
yeah, but
this is a learning
you got
experience.
spending bills coming up right away. You've got all these appropriations bills he's
There's
promising.
no doubt. Listen, he's got no honeymoon. There's no doubt. There's a lot that's got to be done.
Yeah.
He's got the Israeli Ukraine aid package, $105 billion of money, 61.5 billion of it going to Ukraine. Much of that going to pay pensions for government workers in Ukraine to keep the Ukrainian entire economy and system alive. That's an economic system alive. So, there's a lot of decisions that have to be made. There's a big debate about whether or not any more money should go to Ukraine, let alone $61 billion. And that's a debate that's right on us right now. Once again, I think we did a video on this yesterday that I'd encourage you guys to look at. On the Senate side, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance, along with a couple of others, is pushing separating the Ukraine from the Israel spending. And so you can get right to the Israel spending where it's less controversial. You might have to separate out some stuff. You might want to change some stuff in the Israeli spending, but you separate that out from the Ukraine spending. And that way we can have a real conversation. And so that's an attempt that's being made in the Senate. There's some parliamentary things that are going to likely happen over there to try to make that happen, but recognize in the Senate, both the Democrat leadership and the Senate leadership, and Republican leadership rather, agree on the Ukraine spending. And so this is going to come down to the House, battling it out in the House, and it's going to be, it's going to be a fight, and he's right in the middle of that fight.
Right. So you have the Ukraine spending. You got the November 17th CR coming up, and then you're going to have FISA reauthorization at the end of the year, and then whatever CR comes after that.
Sergeant Barnes.
That is correct.
Mr. Speaker, the Speaker-elect Mike Johnson from the state of Louisiana.
Again, breaking news, Mike Johnson has been elected the new House Speaker of Louisiana. He's from Louisiana. He's the Speaker of the House of Representatives of the United States. And here he is. He's going to be sworn into his new position. They'll give him the gavel, and then he's going to say a few words.
I used to work with the person who just hugged him is the representative from American Samoa, and Amata Radowagan. And Amata and I worked together at House Republican Conference 20 years ago. She's great. She's really a phenomenal person, represents the people of Samoa, American Samoa very, very well. So my celebrity sighting is somebody I actually worked with back in the day. And Amata is really is an extraordinary person. Many of you may have seen her before. She has been during Republican National Conventions for years and years, was one of the people up front, one of the women up front who was kind of running the thing, and you'd see them a lot more than the candidates and stuff. So she was kind of one of those people who you'd see, she'd talk, but she wasn't one of the stars. So you sat there and you didn't pay much attention, but she's represents a great job representing the people of American Samoa. And that's the most we're going to probably talk about American Samoa and the entire history of the Americans for Limited Government. So. You'll note that when Johnson came down, Speaker Johnson came down, he was greeting people both on the right and the left, and it's and so you see there's a reason why something's called right wing or left wing. When you're looking from this direction in the House of Representatives, the people who are sitting on the right are the Republicans, and the people sitting on the left are the Democrats. And that's the whole origin of the right wing versus left wing delegation, that you're in a, that is your, because when you look at the House of Representatives or in the Senate, the people who are sitting to your right as you look toward the speaker are Republicans, and the people on the left as you look at the speaker are the Democrats. Hence, right wing, left wing.
Speaker Mike Johnson, Speaker Emerita Nancy Pelosi, Whip Clark, Chairman Aguilar, all of my colleagues in government on both sides of the aisle. It's an honor and a privilege to once again stand before you as House Democratic leader. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have made clear that we will find bipartisan common ground with our Republican colleagues whenever and wherever possible, for the good of the American people. And House Democrats have repeatedly done just that. It was House Democrats who provided a majority of the votes necessary to avoid a catastrophic default on our debt that would have crashed the U.S. economy and triggered a job-killing recession. It was House Democrats who provided a majority of the votes necessary to avoid a government shutdown that would have hurt everyday American. It was House Democrats who provided a majority of the votes necessary to secure $16 billion in disaster assistance for Americans whose lives have been devastated by extreme weather events. From the very beginning of this Congress, House Democrats have been governing for the people. We continue to look forward to finding bipartisan common ground whenever and wherever possible. House Democrats will continue to, whenever and wherever possible. House Democrats will continue to partner with President Biden and Senate Democrats to put people over politics. House Democrats will continue to fight for lower costs, better paying jobs, safer communities, and to build an economy from the middle out and the bottom up and not the top down. House Democrats will continue to push back against extremism in this chamber and throughout the country. House Democrats will continue to protect Social Security, protect Medicare, protect Medicaid, protect our children, protect our climate, protect low-income families, protect working families, protect the middle class, protect organized labor, protect the LGBTQ community, protect our veterans, protect older Americans, protect the Affordable Care Act, protect the right to vote, protect the peaceful transfer of power, protect our democracy, and protect a woman's freedom to make her own reproductive health care decisions. These are blue lines in the sand, and we will work hard to make sure that they are never crossed. We must also continue to stand by President Biden as he works to bring American hostages and Israeli hostages held by Hamas back home. American hostages and Israeli hostages and international hostages back home. We must also stand by our friends on the international stage. And we have no better friend in the Middle East than the State of Israel. Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish and democratic state. The special relationship between the United States and Israel is unbreakable. Our commitment to Israel's security is ironclad, and Israel has a right to defend itself under the international rules of war against the brutal terror unleashed on its citizens by Hamas. Our ironclad commitment to Israel's security and the effort to defeat Hamas is not inconsistent with the goal of achieving a lasting and just peace between Israel and the Palestinian people. In many ways, it is a necessary ingredient because Hamas is not good for Israel. Hamas is not good for America. Hamas is not good for the free world. Hamas is not good for the democratic aspirations of the Palestinian people. We must also support Ukraine in its courageous effort to defeat Russian aggression. There are only two paths in front of us. We can either stand up for Ukraine or bow down to Vladimir Putin. That is not a difficult choice. We must stand up for America's national security. We must stand up for democracy. We must stand up for freedom. We must stand up for truth. We must stand up for the Ukrainian people until victory is won. It is my expectation that in the next week or so, the Senate will send over. The time for gamesmanship is over. The time for brinksmanship, Ukraine, and for partisanship is over. It's time to get back to doing the includes humanitarian assistance for Palestinian civilians, those who may be in harm's way. The House of Representatives should let me
I think the data packets are all mixed up.
conclude with an observation about the state of
I don't know. I think Jeffries thinks he became speaker.
Biden won. Let me conclude with an observation about the state of our democracy. Joe Biden won the. Let me conclude with an observation about the state of our democracy. Joe Biden won the 2020 presidential election. He's doing a great job under difficult circumstances, and no amount of election denialism will ever change that reality. Not now, not ever. Throughout the years, presidents from Ronald Reagan to Barack Obama, Dwight Eisenhower to Lyndon Baines Johnson have spoken to this chamber and urged us to put aside partisan politics for the good of the American people. President Lincoln spoke to this Congress on December 1st, 1862, in the middle of the Civil War, and noted that we in this institution had the power and bore the responsibility to save the Union. The stakes were high. As articulated by President Lincoln, we could either nobly save or meanly lose America as we know it, the last best hope on earth. This is a turbulent time in the American journey, and we have but one charge to keep during this moment of great fragility. Our union must be sustain. Our union must be strengthened. Our union must succeed. There are many throughout this country who are understandably alarmed at the turbulence of the moment, at the chaos, the dysfunction, and the extremism that has been unleashed in this chamber from the very beginning of this Congress. But this too shall pass. Our country has often confronted adversity, and the good news is we always find a way to make it to the other side. We faced adversity in the 1860s, in the middle of the Civil War, when the country was literally tearing itself apart. We faced adversity in October of 1929, when the stock market collapsed, plunging us into a Great Depression. We faced adversity in December of 1941, when a foreign power unexpectedly struck, plunging us into a world war with the evil empire of Nazi Germany. We faced adversity in the Deep South in the 1950s and 60s, when the country was struggling to reconcile the inherent contradictions between Jim Crow segregation and the glorious promises of the Constitution. We faced adversity on September 11th, 2001, when the towers and the Pentagon were unexpectedly struck, killing thousands of lives in an instant. We faced adversity right here in the House of Representatives, when on January 6, 2021, a violent mob of insurrectionists, incited by some in this chamber, overran the House floor as part of an effort to halt the peaceful transfer of power. Every time we faced adversity, the good news here in America is that we always overcome. That is the power of American
He just compared
exceptionalism.
J6
That is
to
why
Pearl
America
Harbor,
is the land of the
9/11,
free and the
and the
home
Civil
of the
War.
brave. That is why I remain optimistic about the future of this country. That is why America is the last best hope on earth. God bless you. God bless the House of Representatives. God bless the United States of America.
Wow. That was the most, if you want to know why we have to beat these people, that's why. That's why. This is the fact that he used that forum, which should have been
honor and responsibility to hand over the people's gavel here in the United States House of Representatives to a family man, a hardworking man, a Baptist man, a Southern man, a son of a firefighter's household, the gentleman from the great state of Louisiana and the 56th Speaker of the United States House of Representatives, the Honorable Mike Johnson.
Yeah, breaking news. Mike Johnson, elected speaker, he's about to speak.
Thank you. Thank you all. First, a few words of gratitude. I want to thank Leader Jeffries. I do look forward to working with you on behalf of the American people. I know we see things from very different points of view, but I know that in your heart you love and care about this country and you want to do what's right. And so we're going to find common ground there. All right? I want to express my great thanks for our Speaker Emeritus, Kevin McCarthy. Kevin has dedicated over 2 decades of his life to selfless public service, 16 of those years in this House. And you would be hard-pressed to find anybody who loves this institution more or has contributed more to it. He is the reason we're in this majority today. His impact can never be overstated, and I want to thank him for his leadership, his friendship, and the selfless sacrifice that you and Judy have made for so many years. You helped build it, Kevin, and we owe you a great debt of gratitude. I want to thank the dedicated and overworked staff of this beleaguered House. They accept praise so stoically. But Miss Susan Cole, our House reading clerk, and yes. Listen, all the clerks and all the staff, you know, they're terribly overworked. This has been a grueling process, but they have served an integral role in keeping our republic, and we thank them for that service. I know we all do. I want to thank my dedicated wife of almost 25 years, Kelly. She's not here. We couldn't get a flight in time. This happened sort of suddenly. But we're going to celebrate soon. She spent the last couple of weeks on her knees in prayer to the Lord, and she's a little worn out. We all are. I want to thank our children, Michael and Hannah and Abby and Jack and Will. All of our children sacrifice. All of them do, and we know that. And there's not a lot of perks to being a member of Congress's kid, right? And so I want to thank all of your families as well for what they endure and what they've had to endure for the last few weeks. We've been here a while. Yeah. I want to thank my faithful mother, Jeannie Johnson, who bore me at the age of 17. And my brothers, Chris and Josh, and my sister, Laura, and all their families, and all of our extended family. In Louisiana, family's a big deal, and we got a bunch of them. I especially want to thank all the extraordinary people of the great state of Louisiana. We have never had a Speaker of the House hail from our state, and so they've been lifting us up. I thank the people of Louisiana for the opportunity to serve you in Congress, and I'm humbled by your continuous support. We will make you proud. To my colleagues, I want to thank you all for the trust that you have instilled in me to lead us. I want to say to the American people, on behalf of all of us here, we hear you. We know that, but the time for action is now, and I will not let you down. To my colleagues, I want to thank you all for the trust that you have instilled in me. I want to say to the American people, on behalf of all of us here, we hear you. We know that, but the time for action is now, and I will not let you down.
Sorry about the jumping around there. The internet connection catching up with the live feed. And sometimes it jumps around, so they keep them standing up, and it might glitch again.
Yeah, it's like.
I want to say to the American people, on behalf of all of us here, we hear you. We know the challenges you're facing. We know that, that there's a lot going on in our country, domestically and abroad, and we are ready to get to work again to solve those problems, and we will. Our mission here is to serve you well, to restore the people's faith in this House, in this great and essential institution. My dad, it was mentioned, my dad was a firefighter. He was an assistant chief in the fire department in my hometown of Shreveport, Louisiana, a little town in northwest Louisiana. On September 17th, 1984, when I was 12 years old, he was critically burned and permanently disabled in the line of duty. All I ever wanted to be when I grew up was the chief of the fire department in Shreveport. But after the explosion on that fateful day, he nearly died, and it was a long road back, and it changed all of our life trajectories. I'm the oldest of 4 kids, and my dad, he lived with pain all the rest of his life for decades more, and I lost my dad to cancer 3 days before I got elected to Congress, 3 days. And he wanted to be there at my election night so badly. I'm the first college graduate in my family. This was a big deal to him. And so several weeks after that, it was early 2017. It was my freshman term, and it fell to me to be in the rostrum one night to serve here as Speaker Pro Tem. I thought that was a big deal until I figured out that's what you do for freshmen late at night. And I think if my memory serves, Miss Jackson Lee was winding down one of her long, eloquent speeches. And not that I was not enraptured by her speech, but I looked up at the top of the chamber there, and I saw the face of Moses staring down. And I just felt in that moment the weight of this place, right? The history that is revered here and the future that we are called to forge. And I really was just kind of almost overwhelmed with emotion. It occurred to me in that moment, it had been several weeks, and I had not had an opportunity yet to grieve my dad's passing. And I just had this sense that somehow he knew. And I had tears come to my eyes, and I was standing here, and I'm wiping them away, and then it suddenly occurs to me, the late night C-SPAN viewers are going to think something's very wrong with the new young congressman from Louisiana. It wasn't Sheila's speech. I'm sorry. I just knew in that moment that my dad, my father would be proud of me, and I felt that he was. And I think all of our parents are proud of what we're called to do here. I think all the American people at one time had great pride in this institution, but right now, that's in jeopardy. And we have a challenge before us right now to rebuild and restore that trust. This is a beautiful country. It's the beauty of America that allows a firefighter's kid like me to come here and serve in this sacred chamber where great men and women have served before all of us and strive together to build and then preserve what Lincoln did refer to as the last best hope of man on earth. We stand at a very dangerous time. I'm stating the obvious. We all know that. The world is in turmoil. But a strong America is good for the entire world. We are the beacon of freedom, and we must preserve this grand experiment in self-governance. It still is. We're only 247 years into this grand experiment. We don't know how long it will last, but we do know that the founders told us to take good care of it. I want to tell all my colleagues here what I told the Republicans in that room last night. I don't believe there are any coincidences in a matter like this. I believe that Scripture, the Bible, is very clear. That God is the one that raises up those in authority. He raised up each of you, all of us. And I believe that God has ordained and allowed each one of us to be brought here for this specific moment in this time. This is my belief. I believe that each one of us has a huge responsibility today to use the gifts that God has given us to serve the extraordinary people of this great country and the rebuke of the Cold War era philosophy of the Soviet Union. That philosophy was Marxism and communism, which begins with the premise that there is no God. This is a critical distinction that is also articulated in our nation's birth certificate. We know the language well, the famous second paragraph that we used to have children memorize in school, and they don't do that so often anymore, but they should. G.K. Chesterton was the famous rostrum. And if you look at the little guide that they give tourists and constituents who come and visit the house,
Sorry,
if you
guys,
turn in
it's
there to
jumping
about
around
page
again.
14 in the middle of that guide, it tells you in school, and they don't do that so often anymore, but they should. Chesterton Ostrom. A little guide that they give tourists and constituents who come and visit the house, come about page 14 in the middle of that guide, it tells you in school, and they don't do that so often anymore, but they should. G.K. Chesterton was the famous British philosopher and statesman, and he said one time, America is the only nation in the world that is founded upon a creed. And he said it's listed with almost theological lucidity in the Declaration of Independence. What is our creed? We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, not born equal, created equal. And they are endowed by the same inalienable rights, with the same inalienable rights, life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. That is the creed that has animated our nation since its founding, that has made us the great nation that we are. And we're in a time of extraordinary crisis right now. And the world needs us to be strong. They need us to remember our creed and our admonition. Turmoil and violence have rocked the Middle East and Eastern Europe. We all know it, and tensions continue to build in the Indo-Pacific. The country demands strong leadership of this body, and we must not waver. Our nation's greatest ally in the Middle East is under attack. The first bill that I'm going to bring to this floor in just a little while will be in support of our dear friend Israel, and we're overdue in getting that done. We're going to show not only Israel, but the entire world that the barbarism of Hamas that we have all seen play out on our television screens is wretched and wrong, and we are going to stand for the good in that conflict. We have a catastrophe at our southern border. The Senate and the White House can no longer ignore the problem. From Texas to New York, wave after wave of illegal migrants are stressing our communities to their breaking points. We know that our streets are being flooded with fentanyl, and all of our communities, children, and even adults are dying from it. The status quo is unacceptable. Inaction is unacceptable, and we must come together and address the broken border. We have to do it. The skyrocketing cost of living is unsustainable, and Americans should not have to worry about how they're going to feed their family every week because they can't afford their groceries anymore. Everybody in this room should think about this. Here's the stats. Prices have increased over 17% in the last 2 years. Credit card interest rates are at the highest level in nearly 3 decades, and mortgage rates are now at a peak we haven't seen since 2001. We have to bring relief to the American people by reining in federal spending and bringing down inflation. The greatest threat to our national security is our nation's debts. And while we've been sitting in this room, that's right, the debt has crossed almost $33.6 trillion. In the time that it's going to take me to deliver this speech, we'll go up another 20 million in debt. It's unsustainable. We have to get the country back on track. Now, we know this is not going to be an easy task, and tough decisions will have to be made. But the consequences, if we don't act now, are unbearable. We have a duty to the American people to explain this to them so they understand it well. And we are going to establish a bipartisan debt commission to begin working on this crisis immediately. We all know that we also live in a time of bitter partisanship. It was noted, and it's been on display here today, right? When our people are losing their faith in government, when they're losing sight of the principles that made us the greatest nation in the history of the world, I think we got to be mindful of that. We're going to fight. We're going to fight vigorously over our core principles because they're at odds a lot of times now in this modern era. We have to sacrifice sometimes our preferences because that's what's necessary in a legislative body. But we will defend our core principles to the end. In his farewell address, thank you. In his farewell address, President Reagan extolled freedom, limited government, the rule of law, peace through strength, fiscal responsibility, free markets, and human dignity. Those are the foundations that made us the extraordinary nation that we are. And you and I today are the stewards of those principles. The things that have made us the freest, most powerful, most successful nation in the history of the world. The things that have made us truly exceptional. In this time of great crisis, it is our duty to work together, as previous generations of great leaders have, to face these great challenges and solve these great problems. I will conclude with this. The job of the Speaker of the House is to serve the whole body, and I will. But I've made a commitment to my colleagues here that this Speaker's office is going to be known for decentralizing the power here. My office is going to be known for members being more involved and having more influence in our processes and all the major decisions that are made here, for predictable processes and regular order. We owe that to the people. That's right. And I'm going to make this commitment to you, to my colleagues here and on the other side of the aisle as well. My office is going to be known for trust and transparency and accountability, for good stewardship of the people's treasure, for the honesty and integrity that is incumbent upon us, all of us, here in the people's house. Our system of government is not a perfect system. It's got a lot of challenges, but it is still the best one in the world, and we have an opportunity to preserve it. Last thing I'm going to say is a message to the rest of the world. They have been watching this drama play out for a few weeks. We've learned a lot of lessons, but you know what? Through adversity, it makes you stronger. And yeah, and we want our allies around the world to know that this body of lawmakers is reporting again to our duty stations. Let the enemies of freedom around the world hear us loud and clear. The People's House is back in business. Thank you. Thank you. We will do our duty here. We will serve you well. We will govern well, and we'll make you proud in this institution again. We're going to fight every day to make sure that is true. I look forward to the days ahead. I genuinely believe in my heart that the best days of America are still ahead of us. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, new Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. Just some remarks there. They'll have some legislation coming to the floor.
Well, he already promised. He said they're going to have Israel to the floor as soon as possible.
I'm now
and
I ask the Dean of the House of Representatives, the Honorable Harold Rogers of Kentucky, to please administer the oath of office.
All right, we'll have an oath of office here.
Mr. Speaker Designee, congratulations on your election.
Thank you, sir.
When our founding fathers chose a bold, new, and innovative new self-rule government, it was met by deep skepticism by the world's monarchs. They said self-rule is only a dream. Our founders said they're right. It's the American dream.
Amen.
Now it's our dream. We're in charge. The speakership of the United States House of Representatives is the crucial outpost for the well-being of the people's government, the keeper, if you will, of the dream. Sir, if you wish to assume this awesome responsibility, please raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear that you will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that you take this obligation freely without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office on which you are about to enter. So help you God?
I do. So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. Speaker.
Now you have a speaker.
A lot of times when these things happen, you have to put a lot of commentary afterwards. I think that the speech given by
Would y'all like to get
now
right into governing?
Speaker. Wow. So
They're gonna
I
do
think
stuff
that says
then.
it all. Yeah. How about that?
For what purpose
I
does
think his
gentleman
speech says it all.
seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, that is a nice ring to it, by the way. Mr. Speaker, I offer a privilege resolution to notify the Senate of the election of Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House of Representatives and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 810. Resolved that a message be sent to the Senate to inform that body that Mike Johnson, a representative from the state of Louisiana, has been elected Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to consider is laid on the table. For what purpose does the gentleman from Louisiana seek recognition?
Mr. Speaker, to notify President Biden of the election of Mike Johnson as Speaker of the House, I offer a privilege resolution and ask for its immediate consideration.
The clerk will report the resolution.
House Resolution 811. Resolved that the clerk be instructed to inform the President of the United States that the House of Representatives has elected Mike Johnson, a representative from the state of Louisiana, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Without objection, the resolution is agreed to, and the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Thank you. All right. The chair would take this occasion to note that the speaker's announced policies with respect to particular aspects of the legislative process placed in the record on January 9, 2023 will continue in effect for the remainder of the 118th Congress. The chair announces that the speaker has delivered to the clerk a letter dated October 25th, 2023, listing members in the order in which each shall act as Speaker pro tempore under Clause 8B3 of Rule 1. The chair lays before the House a communication.
The Honorable, the Speaker, House of Representatives. I hereby designate Representative Steve Scalise to exercise any authority regarding assembly, reassembly, convening, or reconvening of the House pursuant to House Concurrent Resolution 1, Clause 12 of Rule 1, and any concurrent resolution of the concurrent Congress as may contemplate my designation of members to exercise similar authority. In the event of the death or inability of that designee, the alternate members of the House listed in the letter bearing this date that I have placed with the clerk are designated in turn for the same purpose. Signed sincerely, Mike Johnson, Speaker.
The chair lays before the House a communication.
All right. I think this is just going to be more formalities
The
kind
Honorable
of
Kevin
going
Heffernan.
forward
Yeah,
here.
that
So-
was interesting because that
DC.
who was on that list wasn't known in the past, and he just laid it out and said, "Here's who my designee is."
Right.
So that's actually a reform and kind in that there's no mystery here. So that's now recognizing, they've kind of, C-SPAN's one of their glitches here, but would not
Oh no, I just
surprise-
muted it, so we don't have
Oh.
to listen to these boilerplate
Okay.
resolutions come forward. I think we can
Okay.
kind of wrap this up. We've got a speaker
Yeah,
now.
we've got a speaker, and folks, once again, I want to thank you for participating in this process. This is a historic process. It's an important process, and your participation in letting your members of Congress know that you want to have a speaker who's going to push limited government principles led us to this day. And if you weren't moved by Mike Johnson's speech, Speaker Johnson's speech, I think you need to look at it again, because as even with all the glitching, we have a speaker, and I think he's, pray for him every day, but I was impressed, and I hope you were too. We're going to sign off. I appreciate every one of you who stuck with us, and and maybe join somewhere in the middle of it. But the fact of the matter is, this has been a troubled time, but I think they got it right.
Right.
And
I'm happy to report, Rick, that the House of Representatives is once again boring.
Let's hope so. Well, actually, it's not going to be boring for us because we got to deal with all this stuff. But bottom line is, hopefully, we won't have a lot of C-SPAN showing you guys a lot of C-SPAN. Anyway, with that, we just wish you a great day and just God bless America. Thank you for tuning in.
We got a new speaker, Mike Johnson, Sir Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, joined by Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a good day.
Take care.